My name is Gregory Pereira. I'm actually an islander, Kittian. Many years now I've been doing the interpretive type of touring on St. Kitts, taking people into the mountains, explaining the rainforest, taking them to historic landmarks like the Bloody River Canyon, talking about the petroglyphs, and also plantation type stories. So I've turned a hobby into a business basically as a career. From what I understand, it's where there was an unfortunate massacre of the proud and free people who had been here before the Europeans arrived in 1623-24. What I've been told or understood from my readings is that in 1626, the French and English set upon these proud and free people who had been living there for generations prior to their arrival, set upon them at night and actually massacred many hundreds, to the point where the river that comes through that ravine flowed red for days after. In fact, one report I remember reading talks about the bodies being so many of the killed Amerindians that they could pile it up into a pyramidal shape, you know. There's so many dead at that time. So it's a rather sad end to a proud people. That happened just 3 years after colonization. And then by 1629, 3 years following the massacre, it's said that the Amerindians who had been living there for, as I said, generations before the Europeans arrived, were said to have disappeared. They actually left the island within 6 years of colonization. The site today is where you have a housing project, and it has some very interesting trees as well. I would like to see it preserved. That is the Amerindian site where the petroglyphs are located, where these proud and free people were actually massacred. That's as much as I know. What you have is a very strange geological formation. It has a serpentine, sort of snake-like shaped canyon that has narrow walls, probably no more than 10-15 feet wide and as much as 100 feet deep in some areas. And so this crack in the earth essentially is where water flows. And what's really peculiar and interesting about this serpentine-shaped canyon is that on the walls, maybe about 6 feet off the ground, 5 feet off the ground, there are Indian rock drawings, petroglyphs left by these people. And they seem to follow a particular seam along the canyon wall where, what I understand from geology, there may have been the petering out of a pyroclastic flow. So there's a nice texture to that seam in the wall. And some way they were able to fashion drawings in that seam. Mostly of faces, some are of symbols. And so when I take my guests into that canyon, it's with reverence. And, you know, I talk about this massacre that occurred there, and I say to them that this must have been a place of great spirituality for the people who had left these rock drawings. We're not sure how old the rock drawings are, whether they go back to the earliest times, or whether they're from just before the Amerindians were massacred. We're not sure actually what the rock drawings mean. The interpretation could be that they're totems to keep evil spirits away, that they could be memorials to dead ancestors, or it could be just a record of some sort that they put there. So we're not exactly sure what the petroglyphs mean. And what's really the icing on the cake, or the jewel in the crown for me going into that canyon, is a particularly large boulder that's wedged itself into the canyon walls a little ways in, that has been shaped into what looks like a giant heart. And I find it peculiar that there are symmetrical concave areas on that boulder that seem to have been rubbed by somebody into existence. And so, you know, other than the petroglyphs, you also have this big boulder that lends weight to its mysticism, really, that particular canyon. Well, every 4 or 5 years, somewhere around the Caribbean, CARICOM has what's called CARIFESTA, which is a festival of arts and culture. It so happened it came to St. Kitts in 2000, and I proudly volunteered to try and help out with this, very important festival. And Stanley Franks was the one that said to me, okay, Greg, we're going to put you into the Indigenous Peoples Activities section. And it so happened that I ended up sort of being the one in charge of making sure that things went well for them in CARIFESTA. So one of the things that was thought of, and I think Minister Astafan was the one that came up with the idea, and from what I've been told, he got inspired to have an atonement ceremony done during CARIFESTA at that site, because of a visit that was paid to him by a Native American chief from the United States, for him to come to St. Kitts on a cruise. And the taxi driver, while driving past that site, told him of the massacre. Now, even before he was told of the massacre, this American chief apparently had a premonition of something bad happening there, and he had cold sweats and he was really feeling very uncomfortable. And he said to the taxi driver that was taking him for the drive up to Brimstone Hill, say, did something happen here unusual? And when he was told of the story of the massacre, this American chief made a point to go visit the Minister of Tourism, who was Dwyer Stefan at the time, and relate to him his feelings of what had happened to him when he went past that site. And so Dwyer, I guess, Honorable Dwyer, I guess, was inspired by this visit from the Indian chief to suggest, or maybe even to insist, that as part of the Carib Festival activities for the indigenous people, that an entombment ceremony be done. So that's how I understand it came about. And so one of the things I was involved in while helping with Carib Festival and the indigenous people's activities was to be a part of that atonement ceremony. So what happened is that these folks who had come here for Carib Festival, who are descended from these people, and they came from Suriname, they came from Belize, they came from Trinidad, they came from Guyana, and even came from Dominica, the descendants of these proud and free people who had been here before the Europeans. They then decided to have a dusk to dawn ceremony as an atonement ceremony. And that all happened down in the playing field at Stone Fort, as we call it, or Challengers. And that is something that really moved me, because I could see and I could sense how proud these people are of their heritage, and how very much in touch they are really still today with the ancestors that came before them. So it was a very moving ceremony, and Minister Astafan was there, and ZIZ filmed parts of it as well. And I remember the chief shaman of Papa Bosch from Suriname, doing his thing on the playing field and then moving up with a whole group up into Bloody River Canyon at night with flashlights to ask for forgiveness and to do his tobacco offerings and the like. And so the whole thing was a very moving experience for me. And I'll never forget, at the end of it, Dwyer Astafan, Minister Astafan at the time, who was very moved, I believe, by the whole ceremony, did pledge to the nation and to those people who were attending the ceremony that the government of St. Kitts would honor these people's memory through a day of the year being recognized as their day, or as a place of memory, a piece of land set aside to commemorate their existence in our past, or some way that would be found by the government to recognize these proud and free people who would come before us today. Now, unfortunately, this happened in the year 2000. This is 2015 almost. Nothing has been done. So that's my recollection of the whole story of the atonement ceremony. Yeah, I really think it is very important to us as a people, especially being a fully independent nation as we are, St. Kitts and Nevis. We must remember that as we go forward, we need to forge our own identity, create our own Kittitian division identity, and a part of that definitely has to be our Kalinago past. These people helped our ancestors during the days of oppression find a way to survive in the bush, find a way to survive on the plantations. Their culture still is a part of our Christmas activities. You see it in the masquerades and things like that. So their memory still lives with us, even though we may not consciously know that or accept that. But definitely the Amerindians or the Kalinago culture is a part of our everyday life, still today on St. Kitts. So to me it's very important that significance be brought to the surface again and recognized as a part of our patrimony, as an independent country going forward. I would love to see a peace park created in that area. I would love to see where, especially with the government now planning to create a housing project along the periphery of this canyon, that a piece of land be set aside as a sort of freedom or peace park, where people can go for, meditation, for prayers, or just have a picnic with their family, and to remember, the ancestors of our nation. Who were these people? They're still in our blood, still in our culture, even though they're not here as a race. And probably even a day of the year that could be recognized as the Indigenous Peoples Day, but that's pushing it. But definitely a park, I think, or a piece of land dedicated to their memory, a nice garden, green area with beautiful trees and so on, areas where people go and have picnic, etc. I think would be a good idea. Up at the Brimstone Hill National Park Fortress, a UNESCO site, there is in fact in one of the dungeons, for want of a better word, in the citadel, cardboard boxes with these proud and free people's ancestors' bones. Now they know of those bones being there. They actually went and saw the bones themselves and touched them with their hands. They are not happy with the fact that their ancestors' bones are rather unceremoniously kept, for want of a better word, in captivity in a European fortress, right? So one of the other things that they reminded me of just a few weeks ago when I visited them is that these bones need to be dealt with more respectfully. There has to be some way to bring closure to the fact that these bones are being kept unceremoniously in cardboard boxes in the Brimstone Hill Fortress. And so what they're suggesting happen is that, as happened really last year, August, in Trinidad, when Amerindians' bones were found where I think the Parliament building is in Trinidad, in Port of Spain. As has happened last year, these bones were given back to the descendants of these people, as there is a so-called Carib community in Arima in Trinidad, and they invited the people from other parts of the Caribbean who were Amerindians to come to Trinidad in August last year, so that these bones could be ceremoniously reinterred into the ground, and with great respect. And I love the way that was done in Trinidad. And I was there, I took film and everything of it. So for me and for the folks I spoke to in Suriname just a few weeks ago, they think something similar should be done here in St. Kitts, where these bones that are in capture really up at Brimstone Hill should be given back to Mother Earth in a ceremonious way, and not be kept locked away, gathering dust, being forgotten. They're not forgotten, they're still remembered, and so I think respect is due. Well, I mean, I'm 54. I'm born and brought up in St. Kitts. I went to school in St. Kitts and as well boarding school in Barbados. And in our history books we were told that the Caribs were fierce, warlike people who came to the islands, massacring the men of the Arawaks who were here before them, taking their women as concubines, and dominating tribal life. But luckily, I love to read, and of late research has come out to say that in actual fact maybe what happened back then is that the people actually traded with one another, traded women as well because of the small population sizes. And so there really wasn't this lie that's been told to us, that's still being told to us in the schools, of a fierce warlike people massacring a friendly, handsome Arawak and taking over his lands and his women. So I think we need to look carefully at what has been taught to us. And that all stems from this 1492 incident, where a man comes across the water and says he's found a way to India. And the thinking back then, as probably still today, is power and greed. To dominate what you find yourself in, rather than to be a part of. And unfortunately, that permeates itself all the way to today, I think, with our history. So when I think of 1492, I think of well, it brought, for want of a better word, certain goods, but it also brought a lot of bad with it. And there's a wonderful quotation I heard once from Rex Nettleford, who was a chancellor at UWI, and he was here giving a lecture for History and Heritage month of activities. And Rex said that there's an African proverb that speaks to true history being told when the lion can tell the tale of the hunter. And so we need to relook to how history has been written since 1492.